I've seen that a lot of times with chips, like who sits there and counts how many chips they're eating?
Yeah,
But the
exactly.
service size is like 10
Yeah,
chips.
yeah,
And most of us
exactly.
are not counting out 10 chips. We're putting a
Exactly.
whole bowl,
Hmm.
or you're just eating straight out of the bag. So you have no
Exactly.
idea. Hi, it's Dr. Shayla.
It's Dr. Antoinette.
Welcome back to another episode of Cooking on Purpose Health. We're so excited to talk about our favorite topic, nutrition labels.
Yeah.
Our favorite thing to talk about. No, but seriously, a lot of people have questions about how do you know what to pick? Especially nowadays, there's so many ways. Like you go down any aisle in the grocery store, everything's yelling at you: vegan free,
Exactly.
keto, gluten free, whole grain, super healthy, pick
Yeah,
me. Like,
exactly.
what do you say to someone who's trying to figure out what they need to be looking at when you're looking at a nutrition label? Like, it's overwhelming. How do you direct people when they need that help?
Exactly, exactly. And just to kind of add to that too, like a lot of the labels are all using sort of these similar, like nutritious, green, light blue colors. Like everything's like you said, it's shouting at you to pick me. And so it's really good for us to figure out how to decipher what's important, especially thinking about the front of the label, like what even matters. A lot of those words are just sort of almost like clickbait words or just like words that kind of get you to look at them, but they don't really mean anything. And then also looking at the back of the label, we'll go over like just breaking down, how the label is separated and what's some good key points for you to look at. And then just going from there, and we'll talk about recommended values as well. So those are some of the things we'll go over in this video, as well as what we go over with our patients, and understanding how to read labels, what's important to look at, and how to not get overwhelmed too, because it's a lot to know. A lot of the ingredients, have lots of different words that don't make a lot of sense, and so just talking about making sure you get foods that have ingredients that are whole too, foods that
Yeah,
have ingredients that you can read. So
right.
start.
Go back. I like what you said about going back to the first part of it, with
Mhm.
the first part being looking at the front.
Yeah,
And I love how you said the clickbait is
yeah,
basically like
exactly,
clickbait in the
exactly.
grocery store. I love that. That's a great
Yeah.
way to frame it. So if there's all this clickbait, should we ever trust the front of the label? Do you tell your patients, or do you tell people who ask you, hey, don't ever look at the front? Like how do you navigate that?
Yeah, so it's not that you don't ever look at the front. Obviously, you look to see what it is you're buying, obviously the product that you're buying. But if they say a lot of things like, 0% fat or all natural, those are some of the words that you want to like just take a look, turn it around. Don't only buy it because it says that on the front. It could be sort of an indicator of where you may need to start looking, but then turn it around. Make sure that when it says all natural, specifically like peanut butter, right? A lot of times it'll say all natural, but then you turn it around, it's like hydrogenated oils, a whole bunch of extra stuff. Make sure when you turn that peanut butter around, it's just peanuts and maybe some salt and a little bit of oil,
Mm,
but it's not all a bunch of different extra stuff. So just make sure that the words natural doesn't trip you up sometimes. A lot of times they talk about sugar, like
mm,
yeah, that's a big one. Some of the
ooh,
say things like zero added sugar. That's a good one though. So if you see something that says like zero added sugar, verify it, turn it around, make sure you see where it says sugars, that the added sugar is zero. Some things have natural sugars. A lot of the fruits, some things will just have natural sugars that occur.
right.
But if it's added, that's one of the things. If you want zero added sugar, make sure that says zero added sugar. So that's a key thing. Yep.
Right. I love how you said with when you're going down the grocery store, like what are the key words to be on the lookout for? What are things that you can trust and what are things that you can't trust? So it
Mhm.
sounds like we can trust the things like, sugar free. That's a good sound. That's a good phrase. Of course, we verify, like you said, by looking at the back, but things more on the lines of like all natural. What does
Yeah.
that mean? Everything we're eating should be natural, right? I don't want to eat something that's not natural. So what does that
Exactly.
even mean? So that's such a great point. So then
Yeah.
speaking to that about verifying, right? Before I got on my own health journey, I trusted the front, and like you said, those colors, the color. I never even thought about that, Antoinette. Like seriously, the colors, the blue, the green, the white, like the
Yeah,
colors that make you think of health and
exactly.
vitality,
Yeah,
and nature. And you
yeah,
know what it really makes me think of? Whole wheat bread. I
yeah.
remember being a kid living with my grandmother, and she would buy what I thought was whole wheat bread. And the only reason I thought it was whole wheat bread is because it was what color?
Brown.
That's the only reason. I
Yeah,
don't actually think it was whole wheat bread. I think it was wheat bread, whatever that means.
yeah.
Everything is made of wheat. It's just is it actually from the whole part
Process.
of the wheat?
Yeah,
But man, that's a good point because a lot of people they think, oh, if it's not as long as it's not white bread, it's brown bread, then it's okay. People think that all the time. Oh, as long as it's not white bread, it's whole
right.
wheat bread. And
Hmm.
I think a lot of companies, just the food industry in general, they take advantage of that. Like, okay,
Yeah.
we're gonna make sure the bread is dark and brown and say whole grains, but that's not the same thing as whole wheat, right? And like there's rules to that. You can actually even say that on the label, but if you look on the back and you don't see that the first ingredient should say whole wheat flour. Whole wheat
Mhm.
flour should be listed there. Then it's not actually a whole grain. So maybe we should talk
Exactly.
about the back.
Yeah, exactly.
What we look for.
Exactly. I was just gonna say that. So the back is separated into the nutrition label itself and then the
Yep.
ingredients. And we can kind of just start with the ingredients. You brought up a really great point that the very first ingredient is the most important in the sense that that's what's mostly there. Like
Yep.
usually if it says sugar first, you're gonna get a bunch of sugar and then whatever else is in there. If it says whole wheat first, that's the primary ingredient. So the very first one, and then as it goes down the list, that's what's less and less and less in there. And we
Mm-hmm.
talk about whole foods, making sure that hopefully you can read what's in there. There are some things that give different taste or preserve or things like that, like citric acid or things like that, that are natural in the sense that it's not like a synthetic process thing, but it's not necessarily whole or a whole ingredient to the food. So those are some things that people, you can choose to, keep that in or not have that in the foods you choose. But most of the time, we really just want you to get foods that are completely whole ingredients, like the flour, not the flour, I'm sorry, like the whole wheat or the peanuts only or whatever the cereals are. A lot of times the whole wheat flour or the different ingredients, but things that you can read.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
The things that you can read. If you can't, for most of us, if you cannot read what's on the ingredient label, you can't read it. And then number two, I would say, if it's something you've never heard of, right?
Mhm.
So maybe you
That's
can
a good
pronounce
point.
it, but you're like, is that an ingredient that you can actually get? Would you have that in your pantry?
Right,
Right. So,
right.
like, for instance, if you look at the back of some things, you'll see things like dextrose. Okay, what is that? Well, we
Mhm.
know that's a sugar, but some
Right,
other people may not know that that's a sugar.
right,
Is dextrose in your pantry? No.
right.
High fructose corn syrup.
Oh, right, right.
That's
I
that's
think a lot
not
of
an
people know more
ingredient that's
about
in
that
your
now.
pantry.
Yeah. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people know more about that now. I feel like I've seen a lot of commercials, like just trying to get people away from that type of sugar, but definitely.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
it also goes back to your point of what you were saying earlier about it could say sugar free, but what does that even mean? Is it saying a certain type of sugar is free? Because a lot of times you look on the back of those labels, it may not say sugar, but it has some other version of a sweetener that essentially
Exactly.
is sugar, whether it's brown rice syrup, right? That's still sugar,
Yeah.
whether it's high fructose corn syrup or even corn syrup or anything with the OSE at the end of it, that's sugar.
That's a sugar. Yeah.
Allulose, dextrose we just mentioned.
Yeah.
There's so many that we know are sugar. We know because of the training that we have, but it's hard for people to keep up with all this. That's the
Right.
beautiful thing about technology now. We can Google these things and say, okay, what is this?
Yeah.
If you're not sure and you don't
Mhm.
have someone you can ask right then and there, I would say get on Google and type it in and
That's
see what
true.
does it say?
Yeah, see
What does
what
it
these
say that it
things
is?
are. Exactly. Exactly. And then just to keep it as simple as possible, like we said, like if you know what it is, you can read it. It's probably okay. Try to get as much whole food as possible where you're
Right.
making those things yourself. Obviously, we can't, everybody doesn't have the time to make everything from scratch. But just make sure you're getting something that at least has the most whole food in it for sure. Um,
Yeah.
and then just going to the nutrition facts as well, just starting from the top. Most people usually in big bright letters is the serving size or the calories first you'll see, and then sometimes you'll see the serving size that's right above it. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
good thing, a really important thing to pay attention to is how many servings are in that. Because a lot of times the nutrition label is just for the one serving size, but the entire bag has maybe 3 or 4 servings in it. So that's an important thing to look at. The serving, it usually tells you there's 4 serving sizes or whatever it is. It tells you actually what the one serving size is. It may be a cup, an ounce or whatever it is. And then the calories under that is how many calories are in that one serving amount that they show you above it.
That's so, man, that's a good point, Antoinette, because I've seen that a lot of times with chips, like who sits there and counts how many chips they're eating?
Yeah,
But the
exactly.
serving size is like 10 chips. And
Yeah,
most of us are not
exactly.
counting out 10 chips. We're putting
Exactly.
a whole bowl,
Mhm.
or you just eating straight out of the bag. So you have no
Exactly.
idea.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I've seen they won't even tell you the number of the thing. They'll give you the weight. And in the
Okay.
US, most of us are not weighing things unless you're
Yeah.
like a bodybuilder, and you're really
Yeah.
cognizant of everything you're eating. Most of us
Mhm.
are not weighing how many chips we're eating. We're not weighing how much peanut butter we're using. So that's something
Exactly.
to keep in mind too, for sure.
Yeah.
And then after the calories and the serving size, you'll go down and it kind of breaks down into the macronutrients. So what are the things like the building blocks of that food? So the thing, carbohydrates, your protein, your fat, your saturated fat. But those are the 3 big groups when you think about macronutrients. And everybody focuses on the carb part of it because I think a lot of it comes honestly from the fact that the keto diet is is a big phenomenon. And so a lot of people will think, oh, carbs are bad. But carbohydrates aren't bad. Is what no food is bad. It's about more so, understanding what type of food are you eating. So if you're doing more refined carbohydrates, so things like your cereals, your baked goods, your chips, things like that. These are things that have been processed heavily, like you were saying on it. And so therefore they get rid of all the fiber and all those other ingredients. What I usually tell people and patients is that if you see in the ingredient something that says enriched, that means that they stripped away so much of the vitamins that they then had to try to add back those things, enrich it in order to continue to have some type of nutrients. But we think of it as, oh, that's good, it's enriched. But really what it means is they took a lot away, and so they're trying to put it back. And it's not the same thing, because who knows how much of that our body is actually able to absorb. So that's something definitely to keep in mind with the refined grain piece of things. I don't know. What about you? Have you seen when you talk to your patients that they tend to focus more on the carbohydrates or the fat part or the protein part? I guess it depends on who you're talking to.
Yeah, it definitely just depends on who you're talking to and kind of what their specific, a lot, like you said, the keto is very popular now, so a lot of people are looking at protein and low carbs. And so that's an important thing to look out for, like you said, like how they're stripping things away and adding it back in. Nothing is, especially whole foods. Like again, we emphasize whole foods. Those aren't bad. Just knowing what you're eating, knowing how much of it you're eating exactly. Another thing we talk about is the fat content. There's a big thing about like saturated and unsaturated fats. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I mean, this is to me, it used to be so straightforward, when we first were in medical school, and there's still a big debate about depending on which circles you're coming from, what is the focus? But I think it goes back to what you said about whole foods, right? And so, fat in general is not a bad thing. Our body needs fat, we need cholesterol, things like that. But a lot of the evidence shows us that saturated fat in particular is very much associated with an increased risk for heart disease, mainly because that saturated fat is going to make it harder for blood to flow through those vessels because of the way that it affects the blood vessels. I mean, that's the reason why people can have heart attacks. And then after that, even have increased risk for diabetes, and particularly in the Black population, kidney disease.
Exactly.
As well as high blood pressure. And so what we usually try to tell people, the best way to try to decrease that increased cholesterol and the increased saturated fat is by what you eat. And so the highest amount of saturated fat is typically going to be in animal-based foods. So whether it's, chicken actually is one of the highest weight sources that we see it. People don't think that, mainly because of the skin that we eat when we're eating the chicken. Right. But chicken, beef, anything that has and that's made from animals, but also that means dairy, right? So it will be, the regular dairy milk, yogurt, butter, and then you think about the different oils that we use. And so we're not saying that you should never eat meat, but be very mindful of how much meat you eat. And what I usually tell people, I don't even tell them don't eat meat. I try to say eat more plants, eat more fruits, and that will actually curb how much animal-based food you're eating. So that way you're not focusing on what do I take away, but you're focusing more on what am I adding.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's how I think about it.
Exactly. That's a really great point too. Not focusing on taking everything away, but adding more and more things to your diet, adding variety to your diet with plants and fruits and vegetables. That way you're full, you get that full sensation and it doesn't have to just come from meats. Exactly. Yeah. And so then another thing, on the nutrition label though, you're just looking for the percent daily value. A lot of things on that very right side, it has those percentages. And it'll tell you what percent of the day, this particular thing has as far as fat, sugar, carbs. Like if it says like 5 grams of fat, that may be a 2% of your daily value of fat. So then that's the way you kind of just look at it and see, okay, is this something that I want to, if you're trying to do lower fats, you see that it may be 15% of your daily fat. Is it something you want to consume all of? Maybe you cut it in half.
Yeah.
And also looking at your sugars in particular too, in that area. We talked about it a little bit earlier, like how it breaks down sugar, but then also it gives you the added sugar. And that was something that was newly added too in the last few years, just having that added sugar to let you know that it's not the natural occurring sugar in this product, it's added. And so you want to look at that and make sure you limit that as much as you can. Because knowing your daily value or how much recommended sugar is needed for women, I think it's around 25, and men it was around 36 grams a day. So you can take that every time you eat something and calculate it, like, okay, this has 8 grams of added sugar, then I want to make sure I'm aware of this with what I'm eating for the rest of the day.
And really the biggest place where we tend to see people have the most hiccups when it comes to how much added sugar they're having in what they eat is usually not in what they eat, is what they drink. Especially nowadays, like what we talked about with all of the commercials and the billboards and the clickbaity foods. So one of the common things I see, smoothies, fruit juices, and kombucha or tea in general. On the front, it'll say all these great health benefits, which are true. But then if you look on the back and you see total sugars, it'll say sometimes 32 grams of added sugar. And look at the ingredients, it'll say fruit juice, but then in parentheses, it'll say concentrated kiwi juice, concentrated mango juice. So that means they took a mango, but they didn't add any of the fiber, all the things that make it easier for you not to have your blood sugar jump. And it's just the juice part of it. It's just the straight up sugar part. And that's a problem. Yes, it's from fruit, but that'd be like you eating, 10 mangoes. Most of us aren't going to eat 10 mangoes because we got to bite to the pulp. And we got to bite to the skin or whatever. Versus, you know what I mean? And so that's
a really great point. Yeah.
Keep in mind, it's usually what we're drinking. Usually the first step is look at what you're drinking, whether it's a juice, apple juice, orange juice, all those things. Even coffee, what we add to our coffee.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really great point to bring up too. Like a lot of the juices that we deem are healthy, like orange, like all natural orange juice, or all of these different things, but you're not eating 10 oranges in a day. Exactly. So just making sure you're aware of the serving size, like we talked about, how much is there. And as much as you can, try to avoid juices. Like you said, let's try as much as you can. Some people, they really, really enjoy it. Maybe you make your own at home, but that way you're adding more vegetables to it too, to kind of balance that out. In general, those are all really great points and a lot of great things to look out for on nutrition labels, specifically making sure you don't just do what's on the front. Turn it around, really take a look for yourself and see what it is that's really in your food. Make sure you're looking for whole ingredients in your food as much as you can. Also looking at each of those macronutrients along with the calories, and then looking at the serving size. So you know how many servings are in this package that you're getting.
Yep, that's good. And hopefully this was super helpful for you guys. Looking forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thank you again for joining us. I'm Dr. Shayla. Don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms at Cooking on Purpose Health. And if you want to work one-on-one and have more in-depth conversations, our website is cookingonpurposehealth.com. We will see you next time. Take care.
All right.
Subscribe if you like it.
Yeah.